In the current Daf, Mesech, Nazir Daf, begin 3 lines down at the top of the Yomid, where the Gemara continues with another teaching of Rebbe Vo. What started off this whole interesting sugya, this shiur sugya, in the previous Dafim, was a teaching of, on the bottom of Lamed Hema Beis, Rebbe Vo. It said in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, all the Isurim in the Torah, we don't see Hetem Mitzarf, so except for the Isurim of Nazir, the Torah says Mishras. So on that, the Gemara is continuing with another teaching of Rebbe Vo in the name of a different Mandamar, and the Gemara is going to say what's the difference between them, and that's going to get us into a whole discussion regarding this halacha of Nazir, which the violation is the shiur of a revius, regarding all different types of measurement that are revius. So just corresponds to Bekaz Zechon Cheskel, turn to Daf Chaim, Pishin joining for today's daf. Some of this discussed in today's daf are Eser Reviyos saying that the Gemara is going to go through 10 different halachas that the shiur is the shiur of a revius, of a quarter of a loig. The halacha of shiur yain l'Nazir, the measurement of wine for the Nazir is one of them, which is why it's brought in. The liability of that you could be eating different types of violations of nazirus, and you'll be liable for each one independently. The Gemara is going to explain why that is. And the concept of lav shebachlalis, which is when you have a general categorizational type of issa, like mikolesh yes megef and ayayin, which includes so many different things, machlekes in the Gemara if you get malkis for that or not. So begin the current daf lamed ches, 3 lines down for the top of the Amid. The Gemara continues with another teaching of Amr Bava Amr Belazar. He says, Kol Reviyah Shabbat Torah. All halachas, which Taisus has one gears of Kol Yisurin Shabbat Torah, says some have the gears like Argamah, Kol Reviyahs, and you can explain, like the Gemara is going to say, like, although Arla is, in other words, let's say a quarter of the loig of wine of Arla or of Klaya Kerem. So meaning, whenever you're going to have a liability in the Torah of a Reviyahs, which there are certain Isurim that when you're going with liquid, it's measured with the Reviyahs, there in hetem mitzarf le'esi. You're not going to say that, oh, let's say you drink a revius of wine and you have 2/3 of it is going to be arla wine, and then you have some heter wine filling it to the revius. The het is not going to mitzarf for the issa. Chutz merevius shebenazir, except for the quarter of a log of a nazir, when he drinks a quarter log of wine. Why over there is hetem mitzarf le'issa? Sharem retayra mishras, because the Torah says soaked. Soaked means that it's soaked within the bread, and that means to say that you're combining the bread together with the wine. So that's an exception to the law. So says the Gemara, Ma'ika ben Rabbi Yechanan Belazar. Rabbi Yechanan had quoted Rabbi Vo said on Daf Lamed Beis the same halacha seemingly. So what's the difference? What he's quoting now from Belazar? Says the Gemara, the difference between them is the Rabbi Yechanan Marbi Afela Oichlin. Rabbi Yechanan includes even food items that you're going to say had to mitzdarif for the Isra of Nazir. Why? Because the word mishras sounds like from bread and from wine. Now, Rabbi Yechanan holds that the same thing is all Isuri Nazir, like grape skins or grape seeds. So that was the teaching of Rabbi Yechanan that we said in Lamahema Beis. Whereas Rabbi Lazar, mashkanin, no, beverages, yes, midachrin yaloi, but other things not. Because Mishra sounds like specifically wine mixed with something else. When the Torah reveals it, soaking is with a liquid. But with salads, who said that I'm going to combine, if you're eating that little sandwich and you're going to have that some bread together with the grape skins, who said it's going to combine? And therefore that's the machlekes regarding if we're including beverages only or even regarding food items. Now, once we mentioned Rebbe Vo, name of Rebbe Lazar, and it was regarding the halacha of Reviyah Shabbat Torah, so the Gemara segues into Omer Rebbe Lazar, another teaching from Rebbe Lazar, relating to, and one of them is going to be the halacha of Reviyas of Nazir, that Eser Reviyah is saying there are 10 halachas that relate to the shiur of a revius, and v'nakar of Kahana of Kahana, the way he categorized it was chamesh sumkata, 5 that involve red liquids, and v'chumesh chivarta, and 5 that are with white liquids. As the Gemara explains, these 10 items. So chamesh sumkata. So there's the 5 that are red, which the Gemara says in the Manik, of Nazir, if he's a Nazir, va'isa Pesach, and he's making the carbon Pesach, shahayru b'mikdash, that they ruled in the mikdash, v'meisu, and they die. Oh, that's 5 cases. It's just like in the sentence to remember it. What are these 5 cases? So the Gemara goes through each one of these individually. So these are the 5 red liquids, which obviously like wine and blood. So Nazir is Reviyas Yain LaNazir, which Taisus just points out, that's according to what we call the Mishnah Rishonim on Daf Lamed Beis. There was a machlekes regarding if that's actually the shiur, is it a kezayis or is it a revius? But at least according to the Mishnah Rishonim, although as Taisa says, the Gemara later on is going to say, but pluk to lekamai, we didn't mention certain cases because not mentioning machlekes. Taisa says that's only for the white liquids. But the red liquids, we obviously are mentioning a case of machlekes, and that's the case of revius of wine to the nazir that his liability is revius, which again is according to one mandama, according to one there's a kazayis. That's one halacha of revius. Isa Pesach, what's the halacha of revius regarding someone who's making Pesach? Damar B'Yehuda Mishmol. Arba kais halal, we know the daled kais, the 4 cups of wine we have in the Seder night. They each have to have a revius of wine. So that's the second halacha that's regarding a red cup that has the halachic share of revius. What's shahiru that they rule? It's regarding the halacha of shasa revius. If someone drinks a quarter of a leg of wine, al yoyre, he's not allowed to go ahead and rule. What's b'mikdash? So that's a Mishnah in Krises. Says shasa revius yain. If someone drinks a quarter of a leg of wine, b'nichtas mikdash goes into the temple, into the base of mikdash. Chaymis is liable for death. That's the fourth one. And the fifth one is v'meser, and they die. What's they die? It's not a time like learn the brayso. The brayso says benayin. How do we know the revius dam? If you have a quarter of a leg of blood, which is the minimum for a tumah of oil, it's actually coming out in 2 dead people. 2 people are dead, and the blood is dripping out from them, and the combined total is revius. How do I know shemitam oil that's going to contaminate in the oil? So Shanemek, it says in the Pasuk Miyikra, it says val kol nafshois meis, which is interesting. Nafshois is plural. On all the souls of meis is singular. On all the souls of those who die, lo yova, you shouldn't come. That means it's going to have tumas meis. Now, as Taisa says, nefashis sounds like 2. A meis sounds like 1 shiur, which is 1 shiur of revius dam for a nefesh, because a nefesh depends on the revius of dam, as the Gemara says in Shabbos Avlam and Al from Beis. So you see that from 2 dead people, you'll have a shiur of 1 revius that is going to be mitame. That's the 5th halacha of the red liquids that has a shiur of revius. Says the Gemara further, what's the 5 white liquids that are dependent on a revius? So here also the siman is chalas, nazir, or mitzeira, the bread of the nazir and the mitzeira, shenifslu b'Shabbos, that became invalid on Shabbos. That's a mnemonic to remember. What are these 5 halachas to break down that sentence? So chalas, the first word, refers to revius shemen l'chala, the quarter of a log of oil for the bread. Which bread? So Taisa explains, talking about the chalas taida. The carbon taida had 4 types of bread. 3 of them were from matzah, and 1 of them was from chametz, and each one had 10. Now, from those 3 that were matzah, you had 10 that were chalos. Challah doesn't mean chametz. It was bread, but it was unleavened. 10 were revuchin, which were like fried, and 10 were like rikikin, which were like wafers. Now, that the whole sum total requires a loig, but the chametz one would get a half a loig, and then the 3 matzah would get the other half. Now, from that, the Torah tells us chotzehu, which is half of that half a loig, which is a quarter of a loig, goes to the rikikin and to the chalas, and the other half goes to the revuch, as the Gemara tells us. So we're saying that quarter of a loig that goes to that half is a shiur of a quarter of a loig. That's one of that's for the challah of the carbon taida. Then you have nazir, which is revius shemen l'nazir, which there's a quarter of a log of oil that's for the nazir, meaning because by the nazir, not to confuse with the taida, there's 2 types. There's chalas and rikikin, lobes and wafers, as the Gemara says in Perek HaTaida over there in Menachas Daf Ayin Chesam and Aleph. So that means each half. It's going to have this quarter of a leg for the nether, and for the nether, meaning that that's the amount that was brought with those breads. Then revius mayim l'mitzeira, you have a quarter of a leg of water for the mitzeira. What's this talking about? The pasuk says v'tovel oisam, that you're going to dip them. There's all many items that you bring with a mitzeira, red string and all these different things. And it says in the pasuk you're going to dip them and the living bird into the blood of the bird that was slaughtered, because there's 2 birds. One is sent off, and the other one is slaughtered. So you take the living one and you dip it with all those other things into the blood of the one that was slaughtered, al hamayim achayim, on the living waters. So the Gemara in Saita on Daf Tezayim base tells us that the blood is you bring water that the blood of the bird could be recognized inside of it. How much water is that? That's revius. So meaning the blood is on top of mayim chayim, but it can't get dissolved. It has to be that the blood's still recognizable. That's revius a log of water. That's how much water is brought over there with the mitzaira. And what does it mean shenifslu, that it became invalidated? What's that a mnemonic for? There's not like we learn the Mishnah Masechtas Meila. V'shar kol hamashkin tmein, and all the other impure liquids, placing this agviya b'revius. It invalidates a person where the revius means to say that the Rabbanan made halacha that if a person eats a certain amount of tamei food, his body becomes tamei to be not to be able to eat truma. How much is that? That's a revius. So that's the halacha of making him puzzle, that he's considered tamei for truma. And what's the mnemonic of b'Shabbos? That's a mnemonic of the Mishnah Masechta Shabbos. Mishnah tells us regarding the halacha of Haitzah, there were many dafim over there that says what's the measurements and things is regarding the normal quantity of something. So he said, B'shar kol hamashkin and all other beverages, what's the shiur considered significant to have the liability of Haitzah is b'revias, and B'shar kol sheichim, although the wastewater is also b'revias, so that's also a shiur of revias of like water of a quarter of a leg of a white liquid. So that's the 5 of the red, and that's the 5 of the white. On that, as the Gemara of Sul Leker, really there's no other halachas that require revias. But ve'ikah, there is what we know the famous halacha of Netilas Yadayim. Miravias, from Revias, the Mishnah says in Yadayim, Noitlin Yadayim, you wash your hands. Le'echad v'falishnaim, that could be for one person, even for 2 people. What's called shiur tara, could be even for 2 people. So you see that there is a halacha of Revias. Says the Gemara, no, but plukta like Kemayve. No, we're not talking about in the machlekes, because there in that Mishnah says Yadayim, they actually have a machlekes regarding this halacha, and therefore we're not going to mention this because Rabbi Yossi there disagrees in the Seif, and he says as long as you don't have the last one less than Revius. So we see that there is a machlekes over there, if we don't mention it. Says there's another halacha Masechta Saita. It says maybe paili shalcheres. He would bring a vessel made out of earthenware, and they would put inside of it a chatzi log mayim, a half a log of water minakir from the water basin that was there in the Beis Hamikdash, to go ahead and have the Saita drink these waters that you would drink. Rabbi says no revius. See revius of water. So why don't we mention that? Says the Gemara, plugged like a man. That's about machlekes. We just said that one says a half a leg, one says a quarter of a leg. Says there's another halacha. How much water do you have to put into a urinal that you could daven over there? That's not a problem about that. It's a place that's unclean. It's a culture, a minute amount, says the Tanakama. Zakram says no revius. So you see another halacha of revius. So the Gemara, no, but plugged like a man. Again, we're not talking about case of machlekes because the Tanakama says it's even a kulshu. I says there's another case of mikvah, a revius of a mikvah. Who ever heard of a mikvah having revius? So the Gemara Pesachim, the Zayin and Beis tells us that for needles and for forks, all you need is a mikvah, a gathered water of a revius. So you see that that's another share of water of revius. So the Gemara Nobama here, that case is except for that because the Batlu Rabbanan, the rabbis, they avoided this halacha. In other words, they ended up requiring even 40 saw for needles and for forks. And by a person, you always needed to have 40 saw for a mikvah. And therefore, that would not be able to be a valid case of mentioning a revius. However, as Taisa continues on with Beis, he brings from his teacher, he says, but a revius of a spring, although from a revius of a mikvah, they were mevatel, it's not going to work. You need 40 saw. And we go to Kela mikvahs, they have to have 40 saw. But from a spring, that's from the ground, that they weren't mevatel. And you could tell you forks and needles, even a kolshu. As he brings the Mishnah, the Bryce and Teres Kohen and Parashmini, that it says over there a mikvah is 40 saw, and a ma'ayin in the spring is kolshu. Says Taisim, the fact that it says mikvah is 40 saw, obviously it's talking about after the mevatel of the mikvah of being just revius. Because if it's before that, what do you mean? A mikvah also, gathered waters also purifies with revius. Obviously it's after the mevatel. And still it's saying by a ma'ayin, by the spring, it's going to work with a kolshu. And so it says you can't say that it's talking about before bittul, but it's talking about regarding a person, that a person needs a mikvah of 40 saw. If that's the case, a ma'ayin also wouldn't purify a person with a kolshu. Because you need to have, as the Gemara tells us in Eruvin, Daf Daled, that you need to have enough water that will cover the person's body. And that's how the Gemara says, the chagiga, that you need to have 40 saw. Obviously that a spring needs 40 saw, and l'chol hapach is the amount that it needs to cover a person. So therefore, obviously that a spring would still be good even after the mevatlet for revius. And then says, wait a second. So if they weren't mevatel the revius as it applies to the spring, so why don't you say that as another one of the cases of the white liquid that is by revius? So it says, no, you could say because actually even less than revius works by ma'ayin. Doesn't even need revius. It's kolshu. So therefore, they didn't say that, but that they weren't mevatel according to Taisus' Rebbe. Now the Gemara continues on with Beis that we said in the Mishnah that ve'ena chayav, that you're not going to be liable. Again, remember this parak opened up shleisha, meaning we're talking about the 3 prohibitions that apply to a nazir, and the first one that we were discussing was that of eating that which are yitzim and agefen. So the Mishnah says, you're not going to be chayiv until you eat an olive size, etc. Now, the Mishnah there brought this as a machlokes, what's called a Mishnah Rishayna and Rebbe Kiva. So there's actually two different interpretations in Taisus how to learn this. Actually, these Taisus really belong in the Mishnah, but when we had that the opinion said that you're not going to be chayiv, that you're not going to be liable until you eat from the grapes the shiur of a kazayas. So we had this in the Mishnah. If you just look, you'll see that on the Amud Alf, on Daf Lamed Alf, when the Mishnah spoke about this halacha, it says you're not going to be chayiv from the novim until you eat a kazayas. And then we returned Amud Beis. It said Mishnah Rishayna Meres Ashiyishtu Reviyas Yain. Oh, until you drink a reviyas of wine. And then Rabbi Kiva said, no, even if you soak your bread in wine, your bread with wine, and it's enough to combine it for kazayas, you're going to be chayiv. So there's essentially like three different teachings. There's the Mishnah, which it's debated what that is. Let's call it the Mishnah Achrayna for a second, because that doesn't say who that is. Then it says Mishnah Rishayna, and then it goes to Rabbi Kiva. So Taisa explains this, that the Mishnah opened up. The first thing, not going to be chayiv until you eat from the grapes a shiur b'kazayas. Says Taisus, that opinion in the Mishnah held, the same thing applies to drinking, which that's really like what we call the Mishnah Achrayna, like Rabbi Kiva, that's brought, who says, yeah, even if you have the wine soaked in bread, that the shiur is going to be that the bread is going to combine to the wine for what shiur? Shiur of a kazayas. So you see that not only is eating a shiur b'kazayas, but even drinking is a shiur b'kazayas. Now, whereas when the Mishnah Rishayna said that ad sheyishtu reviyas yayin, no, you're not going to be chayiv until you drink reviyas of wine, says Taisus, the same thing is for eating. The shiur of eating is going to be the shiur of a reviyas. So they're mamish opposite opinions. According to Mishnah Achrayna / Rabbi Kiva, the shiur is going to be for everything, eating and drinking kazayas. According to Mishnah Rishayna, everything, eating and drinking, is going to be a reviyas. Now Taisus explains, wait a second, how do you measure drinking with a kazayas? That's how you measure solids, which is a zayas. How do you measure liquid in a kazayas? So he says a very simple procedure. He says you take a zayas aguri, which is a middle-sized olive, and you submerge it in a cup that's full. The amount of wine that comes out, that gets displaced, if you're going to drink at that similar amount, which is a kazayas, that's how much you can be chayiv, because the olive made the displacement of that amount of liquid. It's obviously the amount of liquid of a kazayas. Same thing works for eating. If that, let's say, just like when you eat from grapes, you put in a cup full with wine, if you're going to have the displacement amount of reviyas, you ate a reviyas of solid, because that made a displacement of a reviyas. So the same thing, you could figure out solids or liquids with the cup of wine, and you'll be able to measure either one. You can measure solids in that of the form of liquids or liquids in the form of solids, depending on the displacement, when either you're measuring how much what you put in is making come out or how much came out, and therefore then to know regarding the solids. Now, that's one interpretation of the machlokes in the Mishnah. But Rabbeinu Tam finds this interpretation difficult for many reasons. He says you don't find anywhere that the Mishnah would quote a Mishnah Achrayna before a Mishnah Rishayna in that order. In other words, if you want to look at the Mishnah, you'll see what we're talking about. Amud Aleph, and then it goes to Amud Beis. It quotes an opinion, then it says a Mishnah Rishayna, then it says Rabbi Kiva. The way this interpretation is explaining is that really, essentially, the first teaching is like the last teaching, Rabbi Kiva. And it's not the Mishnah Rishayna. Mishnah is being called Mishnah Rishayna. It's obviously it's Mishnah Achrayna. So we never put a Mishnah Achrayna, which is the later version of the Mishnah, before a Mishnah Rishayna. That's question number one. Additionally, he says, initially, the Tana is talking about a kazayas, which that's the Mishnah Achrayna like Rabbi Kiva. Then you stop with the Mishnah Rishayna, and then you go back to say the words of Rabbi Kiva, which is like the Mishnah Achrayna. It's a little funny. Mishnah Achrayna, Rabbi Kiva, Mishnah Rishayna, then back again Mishnah Achrayna. Additionally, he says what's difficult is, according to this, the Tana should have said in the Mishnah Rishayna, Ad sheyochel reviyas, until you eat a reviyas. Why until you drink reviyas? Because you're talking about eating. Because the lashon of the Mishnah sounds like that by eating they're not disagreeing about. Because you're talking about drinking. Additionally, he says that just like the Gemara asks, what's the reason of Rabbi Kiva how he has this halacha, but the Gemara brings a pasuk to compare drinking to eating. So then, because why would you say it has the same shiur? Generally, eating is measured in eating ways and drinking in drinking ways. The Gemara then should have brought for the Mishnah Rishayna, why are they comparing eating to drinking also? Because you tell me that they hold the halacha of Revi'as is not just of drinking, it's eating also. They should have asked there also. So therefore, Rabbi Tam says, not like this in first interpretation. When the Mishnah opens up with the words, that the liability of eating is the shiur of kezayis, that's according to everyone. That by eating, everyone agrees that it's going to be the shiur of a kezayis. All machlekes was only regarding drinking. The Mishnah Rishayna held it's until you drink Revi'as, the way all liabilities of drinking generally is, even though the eating is a shiur of a kezayis, as the Gemara says in Perek Kol Shana of Lamed Beis and Daf Mem Aleph. But drinking, they don't learn out from eating, and they require drinking the shiur of Revi'as. So that's what the Gemara says. And now there's actually going to be two different ways how to read these words of the Gemara now. The word loy, Tanakama loy, will depend on these two different interpretations of Taisus. Tanakama loy medam Elohein, or Tanakama is medam Elohein l'chol isuri nazir l'shtiya. Meaning, these two different interpretations were just disputing this idea. Is the Tanakama comparing all these isuri nazir to shtiya? Shtiya is a shiur of Revi'as. Is the Tanakama saying that eating is also Revi'as? According to the first interpretation, yeah, you would take out the word loy. According to Rabbi Tam, no, you would say loy. Tanakama does not compare all the isuri nazir to drinking. No, drinking is different than eating. Eating is a kezayis. Drinking is a Revi'as. Rabbi Kiva, however, who he compares the two of them, he says they're both the shiur of kezayis. What's he coming from? Where's he coming from? Oh, I'll tell you why. Because Kivin dechsev, since there's a pasuk in Midbar, va'anavim lachem b'beishim lo yochel, let the moist and the dry grapes he shouldn't eat. So ma chilik kezayis, just like eating is a shiur of an olive. Av kol isurin kezayis, also all isurin of a nazir are going to be the shiur of a kezayis. Where do you know this from? So Taisa says it's not just because eating is a kezayis. Who cares? What does that have to do with the pasuk of wine when it says a liquid that would be Revi'as? So Taisa explains it's from the word v'anavim. It says with a vav, which is a connector letter, to tell you that all these isuri nazir are going to be the shiur of kezayis, which what's all these isuri nazir besides eating of the grapes is drinking. Because what did the pasuk say beforehand? The pasuk said v'chol mishras and navim layishta, and all the soaking of the grapes you shouldn't drink. Oh, now the vav of v'anavim and grapes is adding on what we said before. Just like anav mara kezayis, so too drinking that was mentioned beforehand that was saying the vav hachibo is also with the shiur of a kezayis. But as Taisa points out, according to the first interpretation, not of Rabbeinu Tam, the gears in the Gemara would have to be not with the word loy. Tanakama medamikol isur nazir would take out the word loy according to the first interpretation. That he compares all the isur nazir to drinking, which is just like we're saying that the drinking is up until Revi'as, so too would the eating be. And Rabbi Kiva compares all isur nazir to eating to tell you that you learn that drinking from eating, like we explained, which is just like eating is a kezayis, so the drinking is going to be a kezayis. So that's a machlekes. Again, two different interpretation cases. What's the machlekes in our Mishnah regarding what? What's one the same? Kezayis and Revi'as are the same shiur. I don't think so. A kezayis is more condensed. I don't think it's Revi'as. I remember where the Gemara in Shabbos when it talks about dam over there, right? But then they're saying it's more congealed. That's when it condenses, right? So a Revi'as seems to be more than that of a kezayis. So that that would be the machlekes about it wouldn't be just be then it would be semantics. But no, it seems to be that Revi'as is more than that of a kezayis. So that's their machlekes. Again, does everyone agree by eating a kezayis and the machlekes regarding drinking, or as the machlekes is no all mamish party lines that we're all comparing eating to drinking. The question is it drinking learning from eating or eating learning from drinking? So we continue with the halacha, the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that additionally that v'chayiv you'll be liable. We went through a whole list of things. You can be liable for wine on its own. Excuse me. I mean, you can be chayiv on grapes on its own. You can be chayiv on grape skins on its own. You can be chayiv on grape seeds on its own. Thank you so much. So the Mishnah said that you can be chayiv on everything on its own. So the Gemara elaborates on this theme of independent liability. Turn about in the Brisa. says in the pasuk, that the moist and the dry grapes you shouldn't eat. What's that coming to teach us, says the Brisa? I'll tell you what's coming to teach you. To make a separate liability on each one independently. Where do you see that over here? So Taisa explains, because really the words lachem veveshim seem to be superfluous. Moist and dry? Just right grapes. Grapes would have been all forms of grapes. Moist and dry. Why are you mentioning that? To tell you an independent liability. That if you eat grapes that are dry and moist, with one warning, they tell you, hey, you're a Nazir, don't eat the grapes. Oh, so you're going to get 2 sets of lashes. Even though they're the same type and the same taste. Because the Maisa is what's called, there's 2 shemois. The Torah mentioned them as 2 separate liabilities to give you its independent liability on each one. Says the Gemara, okay, now from here you're going to learn out to all isurin, not in the Torah, meaning of a Nazir in the Torah. Meaning, makan, just like over here, shumin echad. It's one type, same grapes, same from the same Kerestir region of the grapes, vein shnei shemus. And yet still the Torah gives you 2 independent liabilities for it, and therefore liable for each one independently. Okay. Anywhere we're going to have that it's the same type, but it's 2 separate names, we'll say in a second what does that mean. Liable for each one independently. Says what does that mean? What type of Isur Nazir are the same thing, but it has 2 separate liabilities because the term mentioned there's 2 separate things. What else is there? Says the Gemara, well, we're coming to include Lasuye Chamra Chadata Invi. We're coming to include new wine and grapes. What does that mean? As Taisa explains, even though they taste the same, freshly squeezed grape juice, wine, and grapes taste the same. But since the Torah mentioned them as 2 independent entities, you're going to get 2 sets of lashes. Which Taisa wonders, says, wait a second. Of course, by new wine and grapes, you're going to get a separate liability because the pasuk explicitly mentions them as 2 separate lavin. The Torah tells you miyayin v'sheicha yazir. From wine and from sheicha you should separate yourself. The Targum translates what's yayin v'sheicha. Sheicha doesn't mean beer. Yayin means new wine and sheicha means old wine. So we see already new wine being mentioned, and anavim is explicit in the pasuk. So what are you telling me? Of course you can get a separate liability. Taisa says no. If from the pasuk of miyayin v'sheicha yazir, from that pasuk, I would have thought to say yes. What does new wine mean? New wine, like the Girsam of Rav Ranchberg, means to say within 40 days, but after 3 days of the harvest. Then even new grape juice doesn't have the same exact taste as the grapes themselves. It's starting to taste like wine. But before 3 days pass, the taste of the grape juice is literally like of grapes. You just squeezed it. Then I would say, only one. Kamash Shimon, that's what we're coming to tell you, that no, that it has a separate shame, and therefore it's going to have a different halacha of liability. That's what we're coming to tell you. I mean, you wouldn't have known that from the pasuk. Yeah, of course it's the pasuk. It's a separate shame. But we're telling you from this concept that we're comparing l'chol isun shebeteira of nazir, that you see to say if something is different, this is that different. And I wouldn't have known that from the pasuk. Now, continuing this theme regarding that you could be liable more than one liability for one action. So Abaye says, Achel chartzen. If someone eats the grape seed, leikishtayim, he gets 2 sets of lashes. Why? Because first of all, the Torah says chartzen lo yochel, you shouldn't eat the grape seed, and also you have the general lav of mikol hashayasim megef and the yain. Anything that's made from the grapevine is a lav in the Torah, so you get 2 sets. Achel zag, if you eat the grape skin, leikishtayim, you get 2 sets of lashes, because of the Torah tells you not to eat the zag, and then the general lav of not to eat whatever comes out of the grapevine. Achel chartzen v'zag, if he eats the grape skin and the grape seed, like a shalish, he gets 3. What's the 3 lashes? Of not to eat the chartzen, not to eat the zag, and also of a mekalash yasim given the yain. However, Rava disagrees. He says, no, that ein like ela achas, you only got 1 set of lashes. Why? Because ein like alav shabachlalis. You don't get lashes for an umbrella generic prohibition, because mikolash yasim includes all things. It doesn't specify one specific thing. When you have a lav that includes many different prohibitions, you don't get lashes for that type of a lav. So that's a machlekes. Do you get lav shabachlalis or not?
You're saying that on the first part or on the second part?
Yeah, not on when you have zag and chartzen. Yeah, those are 2 independent individual lavin, but on the mikolash yasim megef and the yain. Now, Masra Papa asked on Abaya from the following brisa. Brisa says, Rabbi Lezaim, he says, Nazir yain kol hayom. Nazir was drinking wine all days in the bar, as you guys are ordering one drink after another. So, only be liable for 1 set of lashes for violating his naziris. Amrullah, they tell him, look, I know it's Purim, but you're a Nazir. Al tishta, don't drink. Al tishta, don't drink. You took Naziris. You can see Baruchim screaming outside, you took Naziris, you can't. They're warning him every time that he wants to drink that he's a Nazir. Bushais, and he drinks anyways. For each and every drink that he takes, because he's being warned. Now, what happens if what happens if he says, okay, I'm not going to drink anymore, but there's grapes on the table? He said, no, you can't have grapes. And he's eating the raisins, and he's eating the grapes, and chartanim, vazagim, he's eating the grape seeds, the grape skins. In other words, a kazayis from each and every one of these things. Additionally, v'sachet eshkol shel anavim v'shasa. He takes a cluster of grapes. He's like, yeah, I can't have wine. So he takes the cluster of grapes, he squeezes it into a cup, and he drinks that cup. Says the Braisa, like a chamish. He's going to get 5 sets of lashes. Why 5 sets of lashes? So he's having a kazayis of moist grapes. He's having a kazayis of dried grapes. He's having a kazayis of grape skin. He's having a kazayis of grape seeds. And also he drank wine because he squeezed a cluster of grapes. Says Rav Papa Tabaya, Ihachi, if that's the case, like you, Lil Kisheish, should get 6 sets of lashes. Because Achas al Makala Shayasa. A 6th one should be for what the Torah tells you, the generic, whatever comes out of the grapevine. So why is there not 6? Which Taisus one, that says, wait a second, once we're asking, then why don't you say that he also had old wine, which is shecher, and that he had vinegar, which is chaimetz? You could also have more. Says Taisus, no, that's not a question. We're not mentioning any possibility. We're asking that from the case that the Tana mentioned, there's more Malkias. In the exact case that you described, there should be a 6th one because Mekala Shes Megev Nayayin. Says the Gemara, Tana B'Shayir. That's not difficult on Abaye because, yeah, we mentioned, but we left over. You're right, we didn't mention all the lashes he could get. Says Gemara, whoa, my shire, the high shire. The classic Talmudic response to this is always, wait a second, you're not going to leave over one thing. Obviously, it must have been at least 2 things. You're not going to say every case. So what else was left over that you're saying this is left over? Oh, says the Gemara, yeah, there are other cases of lashes you could get. Sha'ar liyachal devarai. You get lashes also because you're not supposed to profane your neder. Nizir is a type of neder. You get lashes for liyachal devarai. So we didn't mention that. Says the Gemara, no. If that's where you're coming from, love shiur. That's not considered that we left that over. Because Kikatani, when did we mention the amount of lashes you can get for your violations are regarding things that you don't have anywhere else but other Yisurim that only applied by Nazir. But Layachal Davari Isa ben Adarim. Layachal applies by all Nadarim, so that wouldn't be something that we'd be leaving over. So that's not a good answer, Abaya. Which Chase says that's a wonder. Do we really do such a thing to corner Abaya? In other words, Abaya is coming with an answer. No, that's not good enough. We generally would have let a Tan, let a Amor say an answer. It's an answer. So why are we like saying, we're saying, no, we don't like that answer. But that's my answer. That's what I'm saying. So you're saying, no, we only mention things. So Taisa explains, no, really, because we don't want it to be difficult on Rava. Because this is Machlekes Abaye and Rava. Abaye is saying that you do get Malchus. Rava says you don't get Malchus. So we asked on Abaye, says, well, according to you, should be a 6th one. So he says, oh, shiur. So the problem is, if it's shiur, then it's going to be difficult on Rava. He says, that's not shiur. So if you find another one shiur, if you find another one that was left out, well, that's difficult on Rava. There must be 2. But Rava doesn't have 2 because he doesn't hold you get lav shabachla. So, in other words, we needed to answer for Rava. We're asking it on Abaye because we're not trying to corner Abaye. We're just trying to help Rava. For Rava, Rava's going to tell you, oh, come on, that's not a shiur, the high shiur, because that applies by old Nadarim. We want to tell you something specific by Naziris. So, Tai's just saying we wouldn't do that to Abaye. We're only doing it because your answer is going to be a difficulty on Rava. So that's not a good answer. So Amalei Ravina me Prazaki Ravashi says, what do you mean? But there is a good answer. There is another shiur because v'shiur the bein habenayim, because you have left over the case of bein habenayim, which we mentioned on the previous daf. So there is a shiur, the high shiur. Abaye is saying, yeah, of course you're going to get lav on Mikol Shas Megef in the Yan. We just didn't mention that. Oh, what else didn't we mention? Oh, we also didn't mention bein habenayim. Did you also get lash for that? We didn't mention that. So it's not difficult on me. Now the problem is, as Tais explains, well, now that's difficult on Rava, who holds that Bal Yachal is not a shiur. So, and neither is Abaye's halacha a shiur because he doesn't hold you get malchus af shebachlolos. So why are we leaving over bein habenayim? That's only one. You would have to know what else is being left over. So it says, Taisus, wait a second. This all makes sense according to Rabbeinu Tam that he explained in Daf Lamahayim and Aleph. He explained what's Bein HaBenayim. We had two interpretations of what Bein HaBenayim means, what's between the middle. So what does that mean? So Rabbeinu Tam explained it meant these small grapes that the Tana mentioned, where we're talking about that's we said it. We're adding on from a pasuk that we know even Bein HaBenayim, which is never going to fully mature, that the small little grapes. So Tosfos says, so that makes sense that the Tana mentioned it because the Tana said v'achla navim, the guy ate grapes. Now, eating grapes sounds like whether big grapes or small grapes, and we didn't mention that the lashes that you're going to get on those Bein HaBenayim. So therefore, the Gemara is asking good on Rav, like saying, hello, so why didn't we mention that? We left that out also, my shai the high shire, and you don't hold of Abaya's case, so you only have one thing being left out. But it says, Tais, according to the other interpretation we explained over there, that Bein HaBenayim means to say that we said the guy scoops out the flesh. Bein HaBenayim means between the grape seed and the grape skin, he scoops out the flesh of the grape. What do you mean? The Tana's not leaving anything out, because he says you get 5 sets of lashes. And one of them was for eating grapes, which is one lav. So how are you saying that was left out? What's the question on Rav? So this Tais says no, that also that was left out, because the lav of eating grapes is only when you eat a whole grape. The way people normally eat grapes. When someone scoops out the flesh of the grape that's between the grape seed and the grape skin, that's not the way you normally eat. That's a different lav of Bein HaBenayim. That's learned out from, as we had a drasha on Daf Lamed Hey. So that the Tana is leaving out. Because Taisus explained, although the wording of the Tana sounds like that he's including of the eating Bein HaBenayim by gathering it together, because Oichal Novim sounds like in whatever the situation it is, even if you gather the flesh together, but even so, the lav is being left out. Because you should get a 6 set of lashes, not the same set of lashes as on Novim. Because that's not how you eat a grape. That's not included in grapes. So that's the question on Rava. According to Rava, you're leaving out Bein HaBenayim, and he doesn't have anything else left out with it because he doesn't hold of a bay that we're leaving out the case of lav shebechlalas. So that says the Gemara. Elamar Papa, the Papa says that loy tanya midi chamish, that you don't have to. The Brisa don't read that it said anything about 5, just that you get lashes, and you could explain that it was 6. Meaning he takes out the girsa of that is 5 lashes. It could be actually 6 because according to we said that like a chamish, the Brisa said if you eat anavim lachim veishim chatzan bezagim besachas gadam b'shas like a chamish, you can get 5 sets of lashes. The Rav Papa says don't read chamish. What?
But it should also say Bein HaBenayim.
Oh no, so Bein HaBenayim Taisa is included in grapes. You ate grapes. It just didn't mention the lashes of it. The Gemara says, yeah, don't mention that it gets 5 sets of lashes. It just says leika. Take out the word chamish. How many? You get 6. Says Gemara, wait a second. This is Rav Papa's answer? But as we continue top of Lamed Testament Aleph, Oisvei chamish. Who's the one who asked this? We said Masav Rav Papa. Rav Papa's the one who asked the question that it says 5. Now, if he's saying he was the one who just gave the answer, don't have the gears of 5, so my tema Oisvei. Why did he ask the question? In other words, Rav Papa himself is the one who asked this question of Abaya. If he's not having the gears of 5, so why did he ask the question in the first place? So I'm Rav Papa stands up and he says, look, I'll tell you why I asked the question. Anosavri, I thought, Lav Gemara Hibiyade. I thought this is not a tradition that he has. I thought this is just a svara he has. So therefore I made up. I added on to the words of the Bryce the word 5. I wanted to catch him, entrapment. And I was asking Abai to see, did he make this up on his own? If he made it up on his own, and I'm going to bring him a Brysa, so then, Bahadabe, he's going to back down. And he's not going to try to push a way to have a deiching teretz to answer the Brysa according to his words. But, I didn't know that this was a tradition that he had from his rabbis, that this is the halacha. So I asked him, and he didn't back down. So therefore I realized that what I had asked him was a real tradition that he had. So therefore I said, don't worry, it's not difficult. Itaka doesn't have the gears of chamish. I made it up. I just wanted to see. I wanted to catch him. He's going to say, really? It says 5? Oh, okay, chazalti. I'm chayzer. But no, he wasn't backing down because my rabbis told me this. I don't care, you have a brisa? Fine. Mishtapnish from kasha. He says, don't worry, it's not difficult because it doesn't say 5. So the Gemara just continues, it finishes off the discussion from our Mishnah. He said, we had a machlekes in the Mishnah, if you recall, a few dafim ago, a machlekes, how to translate mechatzanim v'adzag. Is chatzanim the seeds, the pits, and zag the skin, or it's the other way around? Is zag the pit, and chatzanim the skin? So we had a machlekes. So the Gemara just points out, the Amr Rabbi Yosef says, Kamamet tagaminan, who, according to which opinion is the Aramaic translation of this pasuk, mipurtzanin va'aditzurin? Now, purtzanin are the seeds, as Taisus brings like a Gemara by the Zara, purtzanim the yain nesach. Va'aditzurin is up until the skin, because, how do we see that's the skin? Because ve'eschat, which means to squeeze, the targum is va'atzaris. Now, schita, squeezing, says Taisus, is in the peel. Because when you squeeze the peel, the outer peel that has some moisture. You don't squeeze the pit, the seed. So the aditzurin would mean until the skin, because that's where you squeeze something from. So who is the one who translates mechatzan v'adzag, miprotzanin v'aditzurin, which is from the seeds to the skin? Oh, that's Rabbi Yossi, who he says in the Mishnah that chartanim are the seeds, and zag, like he says, like the bell is a zag, is a bell, which is the outer part, and not like the other pin. That's like Rabbi Yossi who says that interpretation. Thank you anytime for hosting us.